The silk sheets felt cold against my skin. As I lay perfectly still, pretending to sleep, my billionaire husband thought I couldn't hear him whispering into his phone at 2 a.m. But when he said, "I love you, Isabella," a name that definitely wasn't mine, my world shattered. Before we dive into this story that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. And stick around until the end, because the twist will leave you speechless. You know that feeling when everything in your life seems perfect on the surface, but something deep in your gut tells you it's all wrong. That was my life 3 months ago. My name is Simone, and I was living what most people would call a fairy tale. Married to Jonathan Pierce, a tech billionaire worth over $2 billion, living in a Manhattan penthouse that cost more than most people make in 10 lifetimes. Our love story started like something out of a romance novel. I was working at a nonprofit, trying to make ends meet on my $25,000 salary, when Jonathan walked into our charity gala. He was the guest speaker, this incredibly successful man who'd built his empire from nothing. When he approached me after his speech and asked if I'd like to get dinner, I thought someone was playing a prank on me. But it wasn't a prank. Jonathan pursued me with the same intensity he brought to his business deals. Private dinners at restaurants I couldn't pronounce. Weekend trips to Paris just because I mentioned I'd never been. Flowers delivered to my tiny apartment every single day for 2 months straight. He made me feel like I was the most important thing in his world. We got married after dating for 8 months. I know what you're thinking. Too fast, right? But when you're swept up in that kind of whirlwind romance, logic goes out the window. The wedding was everything I'd dreamed of as a little girl. 500 guests, a dress that cost more than my car, and Jonathan looking at me like I was his entire universe. For the first 2 years of our marriage, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. Jonathan would surprise me with trips to Italy when I had a bad day at work. He'd cancel important meetings just to have lunch with me. He even started a foundation in my name to support the causes I cared about. I thought we were building something beautiful together, but somewhere around our second anniversary, things started to shift. It was subtle at first, the kind of changes you can easily explain away. Jonathan started working later, coming home after I'd already gone to bed. When I'd ask about his day, his answers became shorter, more distant. The man who used to text me throughout the day just to say he was thinking about me suddenly went hours without responding to simple messages. The phone calls started about 6 months ago. Jonathan would step out onto the balcony to take them, claiming they were urgent business matters that couldn't wait. But I'd been married to a workaholic for 3 years. I knew the difference between his business voice and something else. These calls made him smile in a way I hadn't seen in months. They made him light up like he used to when he looked at me. Then came the weekend trips. Jonathan had always traveled for work, but these were different. He'd leave Friday afternoon and come back Sunday night, looking relaxed and happy, like he'd been on vacation instead of handling business. When I'd ask how his meetings went, he'd give me vague answers and quickly change the subject. I started paying attention to the little things. The way he'd shower immediately when he came home from these trips. How he'd started keeping his phone face down when we were together. The fact that he'd bought new cologne, something expensive and different from what he'd worn our entire relationship. My friends thought I was being paranoid. "Simone, the man adores you," my best friend would say. "Look at your life. Look at how he treats you. You're overthinking this." And maybe I was. Maybe the isolation of being married to someone so wealthy and powerful was making me imagine problems that didn't exist. But a woman's intuition is a powerful thing. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong until that night 3 months ago. Jonathan had been in Los Angeles for what he called a tech conference. He came home around 11 p.m., which was earlier than I'd expected. I was already in bed, reading a book, when he walked into our bedroom. He seemed agitated, distracted. Usually when he came home from trips, He'd want to tell me about his meetings, show me pictures of the city, bring me some little gift he'd picked up. That night, he barely looked at me. He mumbled something about being tired, went into the bathroom, and stayed there for almost 30 minutes. When he finally came to bed, he lay down with his back to me, which wasn't like him at all. Jonathan was a cuddler. Even during the worst periods of our marriage, he'd still reach for me in his sleep. I pretended to be asleep because something told me I needed to. Call it instinct, call it self-preservation. But I lay there with my eyes closed, breathing slowly and evenly, waiting. Around 2 in the morning, I felt Jonathan carefully get out of bed. I heard him pad across the room, and then I heard the soft slide of the balcony door opening. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure he could hear it from across the room. I waited a few minutes, then slowly, quietly, I got up and crept toward the balcony. Our penthouse had floor-to-ceiling windows, and I could see Jonathan standing outside with his phone pressed to his ear. The city lights created just enough glow that I could make out his silhouette. What I heard next changed everything. "I miss you so much," he was saying, his voice soft and tender, in a way I hadn't heard in months. "I know, baby, I know. It's killing me too." There was a pause, and then he laughed, that genuine, happy laugh that used to be reserved for me. "You're everything to me, Isabella. You know that, right?" Isabella. The name hit me like a physical blow. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to stay hidden while straining to hear more. "I can't wait to see you again," Jonathan continued. "This whole situation is temporary, I promise. Once everything is settled, we can be together properly. No more hiding, no more sneaking around." Another pause. "I love you too, Isabella, more than you'll ever know." I stood there in the darkness of our bedroom, listening to my husband tell another woman he loved her, and I felt something inside me break. But it wasn't just heartbreak, it was rage, pure, clean rage, that cut through the shock and gave me clarity. I crept back to bed before Jonathan came inside, and I lay there for the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling. When morning came, I got up and made him breakfast, like I did every day. I kissed him goodbye when he left for the office, like I did every day. I smiled and played the part of the loving wife, while my mind raced with plans. The first thing I did was hire a private investigator, not just any PI. I wanted the best. Someone who specialized in high-profile cases and knew how to be discreet. Her name was Patricia, and she came highly recommended by my lawyer friend, who handled celebrity divorces. "I need to know everything," I told Patricia during our first meeting at a coffee shop downtown. "Who she is, how long this has been going on, what he's promised her, everything." Patricia was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, who'd seen it all. "Honey," she said, "in cases like this, the truth is usually worse than what you're imagining. Are you sure you're ready for that?" I was ready, or at least, I thought I was. Within a week, Patricia had answers. Isabella Romano, 24 years old, owned a small art gallery in Soho. She was beautiful in that effortless way some women are. Long dark hair, expressive eyes, the kind of natural elegance that doesn't need designer clothes to shine. The photos Patricia showed me of her and Jonathan together were like knives to my heart. They looked happy. They looked in love. They looked like what Jonathan and I used to look like. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Patricia discovered about Jonathan's finances. He'd been moving money, lots of money, into accounts I didn't know about. He'd purchased a condo in Isabella's name. He'd been paying for her gallery's rent, her car, her entire lifestyle. This wasn't just an affair. This was a whole separate life. And then Patricia found the emails. "You need to see this," she said during our second meeting, sliding a tablet across the table to me. I hacked into his personal email account. "I'm sorry, Simone. I'm really sorry." The emails went back over a year. While I'd been planning our 3rd anniversary celebration, while I'd been talking to him about starting a family, while I'd been falling more in love with him every day, he'd been building a relationship with someone else. The early emails were flirtatious. the kind of thing that could maybe be explained away as harmless. But they quickly became intimate, then romantic, then downright planning a future together. Jonathan wrote to Isabella about places he wanted to take her, experiences he wanted to share with her. He wrote about how trapped he felt in his marriage, how he'd made a mistake marrying me so quickly. The email that broke me was from just 2 months ago. "Soon, my love," Jonathan had written. "My lawyer is working on the cleanest way to handle the divorce. I've been moving assets to protect them from any settlement. By Christmas, we'll be free to be together openly." He was planning to divorce me. He was planning to leave me with as little as possible. And he thought I was too stupid to see it coming. That's when I realized I had a choice. I could confront him, have a messy emotional breakdown, and probably end up with very little when all was said and done. Or I could be smarter than he was giving me credit for. I could play the game better than he was playing it. I chose option 2. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal while building my case. I had to smile at Jonathan over dinner while knowing he was texting Isabella under the table. I had to listen to him lie about his business trips while he was actually spending romantic weekends with her. But I wasn't just gathering evidence of his affair. I was documenting everything: his hidden accounts, his transferred assets, his attempts to hide money from me. My divorce attorney, a brilliant woman named Helen, who'd handled some of the biggest cases in the city, was amazed at how thorough my documentation was. "Most wives in your situation are too emotional to think strategically," Helen told me. "You're building a case that's going to be very difficult for him to fight." The confrontation came on a Tuesday night in November. Jonathan had just returned from another business trip, this one to Miami, where I knew he'd actually been with Isabella at a 5-star resort. He walked into our penthouse with that post-vacation glow, humming under his breath. I was sitting in the living room with a glass of wine, wearing the dress he'd bought me for my birthday. I wanted to look good for this. I wanted him to remember what he was losing. "Hey, beautiful," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. "How was your week?" "Enlightening," I said calmly. "How was Miami?" He froze. For just a split second, I saw panic flash across his face before he recovered. "Miami. I was in Seattle for the software conference, remember?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo Patricia had taken of him and Isabella on South Beach. "Funny, because you look pretty relaxed for someone who was in boring business meetings all weekend." The silence that followed was deafening. Jonathan stared at the photo, then at me, then back at the photo. I watched him calculate his options, watched him try to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. "Simone," he started, his voice taking on that smooth, persuasive tone he used in boardrooms. Can you explain Isabella Romano?" I interrupted. "Can you explain the condo you bought her? Can you explain the year's worth of emails where you planned our divorce? Can you explain how you've been hiding money from me for months?" The color drained from his face. This wasn't going the way he'd expected. In his mind, I was supposed to be the naive little wife who'd cry and beg him to stay. He wasn't prepared for this version of me. "You hired someone to spy on me?" he asked, and I could hear the anger building in his voice. "I hired someone to find the truth," I corrected. "Something you seem to have forgotten how to tell." He started pacing then, running his hands through his hair. "Okay, fine. Yes, I've been seeing Isabella. Yes, I've been unhappy in our marriage. But Simone, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, standing up. "You fell in love with someone else. You decided you wanted out of our marriage. And instead of being honest with me, you decided to cheat and lie and try to screw me over financially in the process. It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple, Jonathan. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I think for the first time he realized this wasn't going to be easy. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want what I'm entitled to," I said simply. "And lucky for me, your fancy lawyers didn't write that prenup as carefully as they thought." "The prenup." Oh, the prenup was beautiful. Jonathan's legal team had been so focused on protecting his business assets that they'd left a massive loophole. Any assets acquired through deception or hidden during the marriage became fair game in a divorce settlement. And thanks to my documentation, I could prove that Jonathan had been hiding and moving money for months. Helen had almost smiled when she reviewed the prenup. "Your husband's lawyers got cocky," she'd told me. "They never imagined you'd be smart enough to catch him." Over the next 3 months, Jonathan tried everything. He tried to intimidate me with his team of expensive lawyers. He tried to buy me off with settlement offers that were generous but not fair. He even tried to convince me that I was overreacting, that his relationship with Isabella was just a midlife crisis that didn't mean anything. But I held firm. I had the evidence. I had the law on my side. And I had something Jonathan had underestimated from day one. I had strength. The final settlement was everything Helen had promised it would be. 50% of everything, including the assets Jonathan had tried to hide. The penthouse, half his stock portfolio, alimony that would set me up for life, and something I'd insisted on. He had to buy back my shares in the foundation he'd started in my name at fair market value. 6 months after that terrible night, when I pretended to be asleep, I was sitting in my new apartment, a beautiful place with a view of Central Park that was entirely mine, reading about Jonathan's engagement to Isabella in the society pages. The announcement mentioned that he'd downsized his business holdings recently due to portfolio restructuring. I laughed out loud. Portfolio restructuring. That's what they were calling it. Here's the thing about betrayal. It can destroy you, or it can show you exactly how strong you really are. Jonathan thought he married a naive girl who'd be grateful for whatever scraps he threw her. He never bothered to find out who I really was underneath all that gratitude and love. I'm not bitter anymore. How can I be? Jonathan's betrayal led me to discover parts of myself I never knew existed. I learned I could be strategic, ruthless when necessary, and most importantly, I learned that my worth was never tied to being someone's wife. As for Isabella, I actually feel sorry for her. She fell in love with a man who was willing to cheat on his wife and hide money from her. If he'll do it with you, he'll do it to you. She's about to learn that lesson the hard way. These days, I'm building something new. I started my own nonprofit with the settlement money, focusing on financial literacy for women. Because the most dangerous thing any woman can be is financially dependent on someone who doesn't deserve her trust. The last time I saw Jonathan was at the courthouse when our divorce was finalized. He looked older, tired. The stress of losing half his fortune and dealing with the public scandal had taken its toll. As we walked out of the courtroom, he stopped me. "Simone," he said, "I never meant for it to happen this way." I looked at him, this man I'd loved so completely, this man who'd made me feel like a princess in a fairy tale, and I felt nothing but pity. "Yes, you did, Jonathan," I said calmly. "You planned every bit of it. You just never planned on me being smart enough to beat you at your own game." That night, lying in my own bed, in my own apartment, surrounded by things I'd chosen and paid for with money I'd earned through my own strength and intelligence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. If this story taught us anything, it's that we're stronger than we think, and intuition is powerful. Have you ever had a moment that completely changed your perspective on someone you trusted? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that prove we can overcome anything. Remember, your worth isn't defined by anyone else's actions. Until next time, stay strong.